Only Boeing and Airbus still rule the skies. In this video, we reveal how Boeing and Airbus became the undisputed giants of aviation, crushing rivals from the 1970s to today. It's a story of government backing, billion-dollar gambles, and global power plays that reshape the skies. By the end, you'll see why two names rule a $4 trillion industry, and why no one else can break in. To understand why Boeing and Airbus dominate aviation today, you have to look back over a century of aircraft manufacturing. The story starts in the early 1900s, when Boeing took its first steps into the skies. Founded in 1916, the company made its mark by supplying planes to the United States Navy during the First World War. Over the decades, Boeing built a reputation for engineering skill, serving both military and civilian needs. By 1958, it had revolutionized commercial air travel with the Boeing 707, a jet that offered faster flights and a new level of comfort. Airbus came later, but with a clear purpose. In 1967, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom joined forces to create a European aircraft manufacturer that could compete with Boeing's growing influence. The result was Airbus, and by 1972, its first aircraft, the A300B, had taken flight. It offered more seats at lower operating costs, and it became a symbol of European technology and ambition. That early success gave Airbus a strong foothold in its home markets and beyond. By the 1990s, the competition between the two was unlike anything the industry had seen before. A wave of mergers had removed most rivals from the large jet market. Boeing absorbed McDonnell Douglas in 1997. Other manufacturers such as Lockheed, Convair, and Fokker faded from the scene. Airbus, once a consortium, had grown into a unified company. Together, these two giants controlled nearly every order for large commercial jets. The numbers tell the story. Between 2015 and 2024, Airbus received nearly 9,000 aircraft orders and delivered over 7,000 planes. Boeing, despite recent setbacks, delivered more than 5,000 aircraft in the same period. Their combined share of the market for large jets has hovered around 99%. What keeps this duopoly in place are high barriers to entry. Building airliners requires billions in investment, strict certification from regulators, and decades of expertise. Boeing and Airbus have built deep ties with governments and airlines, and their long safety records keep carriers coming back. This is a dominance built on history, money, and trust, and it shows no sign of ending anytime soon. Stay tuned. Enjoying the story so far? Keep watching, because next we'll uncover the hidden battles, government deals, and turning points that shape this two-horse race. We'll dig into the numbers, the technology leaps, and the bold moves that kept everyone else grounded while Boeing and Airbus soared ahead. For most companies trying to build big passenger jets, the dream never really gets off the ground. The money you need is enormous, the rules are strict, and the market is already stitched up by two giants with decades of trust and experience on their side. Fresh startups with ambitious ideas quickly burn through cash. Once familiar names like Lockheed, Fokker, and Convair have been gone for years. And even now, with Boeing facing public criticism and Airbus taking in record orders, no serious rival has managed to crack their hold on the skies. Here's the twist. Boeing and Airbus aren't just holding on, they're still pushing forward. While would-be challengers hunt for funding, these two are shipping hundreds of planes each year. Their size lets them build faster, cut costs, and keep airlines happy with global service and support. The pressure doesn't weaken them, it makes them stronger. And when a competitor does appear, the duopoly has the tools to outlast them: discounts, production slots, and decades of supply chain relationships. For new players, it's like trying to join a race where the leaders already own the track, the pit crew, and the fuel. And that's no accident. This isn't just luck or good timing. Boeing and Airbus didn't just win the race, they designed the course, wrote the rulebook, and made sure they're always in the lead. Before a single rivet is fastened or a design is approved, anyone dreaming of competing with Boeing and Airbus faces a staggering reality. You have to pay just to exist in the industry. The first bill arrives in the form of licensing and certification. To operate in most countries, you need an Air Operator Certificate. proof to regulators that your people, procedures, and equipment meet stringent safety standards. That means building training programs, drafting thousands of pages of manuals, and passing exhaustive inspections. You'll also need route and market access licenses, insurance coverage worth hundreds of millions, and in some jurisdictions, financial guarantees that prove you can survive at least a year without revenue. None of this puts a plane in the air, but without it, you can't legally fly. And then comes the truly staggering part. Even starting a modest regional airline can demand hundreds of millions. But aiming for the large commercial jet market with your own aircraft design pushes that figure into the billions. For context, acquiring aircraft alone can cost $50 million to over $300 million per plane, depending on size and configuration. If you're developing a clean sheet large jet, the aircraft doesn't even exist yet, which means you're paying for years of design, prototyping, and certification before delivery. The bill, often $15 to $20 billion just for development, more than the GDP of some small nations, and you still haven't built the support network airlines demand. Those billions cover far more than the airplane's metal and electronics. They fund wind tunnel testing, flight simulators, avionics integration, safety redundancy systems, and compliance with intricate regulatory regimes in multiple jurisdictions. Boeing and Airbus can spread those costs across thousands of orders. A newcomer starts with zero backlog, no production efficiencies, and no brand trust, but still must spend at the same scale. National pride has not been enough to overcome this barrier. China's Comac C919 took more than 15 years from concept to initial deliveries, burning through tens of billions while still struggling to achieve full Western certification. Russia's attempt to revive the IL-96 swallowed public funds but never convinced airlines to buy in serious numbers. In both cases, the burn rate exceeded the market's patience. And the spending doesn't stop at first flight. Commercial production requires factory tooling, assembly lines, a skilled labor force, long-term supplier contracts, and stringent quality control, each costing hundreds of millions more. Then comes the invisible but essential piece: global support infrastructure. Airlines won't risk buying a plane without guaranteed worldwide parts distribution, trained maintenance crews, technical manuals, and round-the-clock service. Setting that up can take years and hundreds of millions more. This is mind-blowing but also depressing to say the least. History is littered with examples of companies that underestimated this financial climb. McDonnell Douglas, once Boeing's fiercest rival, merged with them in 1997 after jetliner sales collapsed under development and competition pressures. Airline, a supersonic business jet hopeful, burned through more than $1 billion without producing a flyable prototype. Bombardier's C-Series, despite strong engineering, nearly bankrupted the company before being sold to Airbus. The risk is magnified by aviation's boom and bust cycle. You might begin development in a boom year, but by certification day, a recession, oil shock, or pandemic could gut airline capital spending. Boeing and Airbus can survive downturns through military contracts, cargo divisions, and deep reserves. A newcomer with one program has no such safety net. Even if you make it to market, the duopoly rarely stands still. Your brand new jet could debut just as Boeing and Airbus roll out upgraded versions of their existing models with slightly better fuel burn or longer range, undercutting your selling points. Their sales teams often sign decade-long deals that lock in airlines before your product is even available. It is, in effect, a billion-dollar wall. Without deep, patient, and risk-tolerant pockets, a challenger burns through cash faster than they can build wings. The few who try learn the same brutal lesson. In commercial aviation, running out of money doesn't take long, it just takes off fast. To build a jet, you don't start with metal. You start with relationships and supply chains that already serve Boeing and Airbus. A modern airliner is a jigsaw of millions of parts, and nearly every supplier is already tied in with one of the two giants. At the top are Tier 1 suppliers, makers of engines, landing gear, avionics, and cabin systems. These firms juggle massive contracts and complex demands. Below them, Tier 2 and Tier 3 suppliers produce subcomponents and raw parts. Think airfoils, hydraulics, fasteners, and wiring. Challenger companies must attempt to plug into this layered network, and almost always find the doors closed. Here's where it gets interesting. Suppliers work on long-term agreements, bulk pricing, and production cycles built around Boeing's and Airbus's massive volumes. Newcomers can't just place an order. They face longer lead times, higher costs, and a lack of volume incentives. That makes production slow and expensive right from the start. These suppliers, often spread across continents, also face staffing and material shortages. Between war-era disruptions and the recent pandemic, many struggled just to meet Airbus's and Boeing's surging demands. Could you imagine trying to push your own jet through this same supply bottleneck? It's almost impossible. Trade and geopolitical complications add another layer of complexity. Tariffs, such as a new 10% import levy on aerospace components, have shaken supply chains that once operated duty-free across borders. Boeing now pays tariffs on wings built in Japan and fuselage sections from Italy. Airbus likewise faces new costs. A Challenger without global supply reach finds itself squeezed at every turn. Even when Challengers do secure parts, they lack the streamlined logistics Boeing and Airbus enjoy. The duopoly has thousands of suppliers and can redistribute volume across them. Boeing alone worked with some 26,500 partners globally. Airbus handles thousands more across every continent. A newcomer? Lucky to get a handful of suppliers on board, and even luckier to see them deliver consistently. This is the unsettling reality. Acquisitions further cement this dominance. Boeing is buying back Spirit Aerosystems, its former fuselage supplier, for $4.7 billion to tighten control over production. Airbus, meanwhile, is absorbing Spirit's assets related to A220 and A350 parts. That means even fewer independent factories left willing to serve anyone but Boeing and Airbus. Regional diversification adds another advantage. Airbus and Boeing have multiple assembly sites and logistics networks in the US, Europe, Asia, and beyond, allowing them to shift orders and mitigate delays. A Challenger with one facility, one disruption can shut everything down. This is the invisible cage that keeps Challengers grounded. Without access to the supply chain that's already fully booked and vertically integrated, a newcomer can't scale, can't cut costs, and can't promise airlines the reliability they expect. The message is clear. Even with a clean sheet design, your jet won't leave the hangar unless you can navigate or rebuild this massive supply ecosystem first. For airlines, buying a new aircraft means committing for 20 to 30 years. Switching manufacturers is costly and complex. Pilots must retrain for different cockpits and systems. Maintenance crews require certification on new equipment, often taking months or years. Airlines need new spare parts inventories and must update technical manuals and maintenance schedules. This overhaul demands large upfront investments and disrupts operations. Therefore, airlines usually stick with known manufacturers, creating a loyalty trap that benefits Boeing and Airbus. Here's where it gets interesting. Boeing and Airbus designed their fleets for cross-crew qualification and commonality. A pilot certified on a Boeing 737 can more easily fly a Boeing 787, reducing training time and expenses. Airbus offers similar cross-qualification across the A320, A330, and A350 families. This cuts costs and simplifies maintenance since parts and procedures overlap. Airlines mix models within families for operational flexibility, less downtime, and better crew use. This system builds a strong barrier for Challengers lacking integrated product lines. Switching to a new manufacturer means starting from scratch, retraining crews, stocking new spare parts, and facing uncertain maintenance without support networks. Airlines worry about resale value too. New planes from unknown makers may have poor secondary market value. This risk deters airlines from ordering emerging manufacturers' aircraft even with competitive features or better economics. The airline industry's conservative nature and thin margins deepen this reluctance. The financial impact is huge. For example, a single D-check on an Airbus A380 can cost over $25 million. Training and certification for pilots and mechanics run into tens of millions per fleet type. Indirect costs, scheduling, crew availability, parts logistics add millions yearly. This creates an invisible wall newcomers struggle to overcome. Emerging airlines face even bigger problems. Unlike established carriers with standardized fleets, Newer airlines often operate mixed aircraft types from different manufacturers. This lack of fleet commonality increases costs dramatically. Training multiplies as crews need qualifications for each model. Spare parts inventory expands, raising costs and complicating logistics. This inefficiency drains capital and hinders growth or fleet upgrades. History shows this clearly. Bombardier's C-Series, now Airbus A220, struggled to get orders from airlines loyal to Boeing and Airbus. Despite promising lower fuel burn and advanced tech, many airlines avoided breaking fleet commonality due to costs and risks. This limited sales and forced Bombardier to sell the program to Airbus, which integrated it and offered familiar commonality benefits. Trade disputes add pressure. U.S. tariffs on aircraft and parts raise costs for Boeing and Airbus, but emerging makers without global supply chains face harsher effects. Airlines like Delta publicly refused to absorb tariffs on Airbus deliveries, showing geopolitical factors influence fleet choices. This favors Boeing and Airbus, who use established suppliers and political ties to reduce shocks. Loyalty traps extend to financing and leasing. Lenders prefer aircraft with proven demand and strong resale value. Boeing and Airbus jets dominate secondary markets, providing liquidity for refinancing or returns. Emerging manufacturers lack this financial security, deterring airlines from riskier fleet diversity. This loyalty trap cements Boeing and Airbus's dominance by creating high switching costs and operational risks few carriers accept. Without revolutionary improvements in design, reliability, or economics, challengers can't convince airlines to risk billions. The duopoly creates airline habits that keep competitors grounded long before takeoff. The dominance of Boeing and Airbus in the global aviation market extends far beyond their engineering prowess or commercial strategies. It is deeply rooted in sustained, multi-layered government support that few competitors can match. Both companies benefit from direct government subsidies, including massive funding for research and development, export credits, and preferential treatment in defense contracts. For Airbus, the European Union and its member states have collectively invested billions in R&D and infrastructure since the company's inception, cushioning risks that would cripple smaller manufacturers. Similarly, Boeing leverages extensive U.S. government funding, not only through direct subsidies, but significantly via Department of Defense contracts that provide a reliable revenue stream independent of commercial market fluctuations. Governments consider Boeing and Airbus strategic national assets, vital to economic security and technological leadership. This translates into diplomatic influence exerted on behalf of the manufacturers in trade negotiations, tariff disputes, and international regulatory bodies. For instance, the long-running Boeing-Airbus trade dispute, adjudicated by the World Trade Organization, WTO, has seen both the US and the EU impose retaliatory tariffs on each other's products. This tit-for-tat trade war acts as a shield and weapon, protecting home markets and pressuring potential entrants who lack such backing. Airlines operating within these political spheres often face implicit pressures to favor national manufacturers. Boeing's defense division accounts for nearly half of its revenue, supplying military aircraft, satellites, and missile systems. Airbus's defense and space unit, backed by European governments, similarly commands significant contracts. This military dimension intertwines with national security concerns, making governments less likely to allow foreign challengers to disrupt these companies. The guaranteed defense business income cushions downturns in commercial aviation, allowing these firms to engage in long-term strategic planning, something startups with narrow commercial focus cannot afford. Regulatory agencies and national pride further reinforce Boeing and Airbus's untouchability. In the United States, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, has long-standing working relationships with Boeing, facilitating certification and approval processes that are arduous for outsiders. Likewise, the European Union Aviation Safety Agency often aligns certification protocols with Airbus's product cycles. Nationalistic policies also extend into procurement choices. Many countries favor homegrown products for flag carriers and government fleets, consolidating Boeing and Airbus's influence. This regulatory and political favor creates formidable barriers for challengers lacking a government sponsor with equivalent power. Finally, government backing enables Boeing and Airbus to undertake decades-long projects requiring immense capital and risk tolerance. These timelines exceed what private investors typically tolerate, especially when global economic cycles and unpredictable crises can threaten aviation markets. The political safety net, defense contracts, export guarantees, and diplomatic support transform Boeing and Airbus from mere corporations into geopolitical instruments. Their duopoly is not just a consequence of market forces, but a deliberate outcome shaped by intertwined government policies and strategic imperatives. The invisible hand of governments effectively insulates them from competitive threats, ensuring that no challenger can realistically compete without matching this unique combination of commercial and political power. For every newcomer dreaming to challenge Boeing and Airbus, the reality is harsher than any technical hurdle. It's not just about building planes, it's about surviving a battlefield where governments provide armor and ammunition. The billions poured into research, defense contracts, and diplomatic shields create an uneven playing field. Startups and foreign rivals face more than just market competition. They face geopolitical tides that favor these aerospace giants. When Boeing or Airbus launches a new aircraft, it carries more than engines and wings. It carries decades of political influence, military backing, and national pride. Airlines caught in this web must weigh not just economics, but political loyalties and government pressures. A promising design with better specs won't fly if it lacks the invisible support network built over generations. This is why the skies belong to two. The duopoly is beyond innovation and quality. It also entails a complex web of government involvement that no rival can replicate easily. And until that changes, Boeing and Airbus will remain untouchable, not just as companies, but as pillars of national power and global aviation dominance. Some companies soared and disappeared, but Boeing and Airbus built a fortress few can breach. It's not just about making planes, it's about billions in investment, supply chains locked tight, and government backing that keeps rivals grounded. That's why we tell stories like this, beyond specs and sales, diving into the real forces shaping aviation's giants. If you want more on the duopoly, industry secrets, and the challengers who never got off the runway, this channel's for you. Hit subscribe and join us for aviation's untold stories. Got a jet or tail we should explore next? Drop it below. We read every comment. Thanks for flying with us.